Elden Ring features some of the most stunning visuals ever seen in a game. Each area of the map provides a unique atmosphere, and it would really translate well if we could edit our photos to look something like that. I'm going to show you how to recreate the different areas of the world of Elden Ring in Lightroom into your photography. We're going to cover each of the areas in the Elden Ring world, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss those future episodes coming soon. Okay guys, we're going to do Caelid today. Caelid is obviously super red, super unnatural, unless you're in like Southern California, right? So this one is going to be tough. Like there's a lot of different elements we have to take care of, and there's a lot of color grading and like color adjustment we have to do. And we have to balance between like keeping it like normal looking photo-ish and getting it to the Caelid feel that we're looking for, right? So it's going to be a little bit challenging, but I think we can do it. I've already done it, so I already know the edits we're going to do. And you guys can just follow along, make the same kind of changes to your photos, and we're going to get your stuff looking like Caelid as well. The photo I chose to work with is this one from Florence, Italy. The reason I chose it is the sky is full of clouds, but the clouds are different levels of brightness, so we have some sun peeking through, right? If we look at Caelid, we got the same kind of thing. We don't have any gaps in the clouds. We don't see actual sky, but it's fully cloud covered with different levels of brightness in the cloud. Okay, so that's what I suggest you start with. You have to start with something that at least has a sky that has a Caelid feel, right? Or else, you know, you can't do a beach and turn it into Caelid very well, right? But yeah, we're gonna go ahead and work with this one. I'll show you guys what edits to make. Let's get started. Starting with the tone curve, that's where I like to start generally anyway. We're gonna add a standard S-curve, kind of like contrast. Going in here, I'm just gonna go ahead and paste in the curve that I know is gonna work. And yeah, basically we're gonna take our highlights, bump them up just a little bit. We're gonna take our shadows. The darkest of shadows are gonna come up, right? We have the leftmost point up off the bottom, and then we're gonna pull down our shadows just a little bit below the center line as we move in towards the center of the curve, right? So yeah, that's where our tone curve is going to be. It's going to be pretty simple. Let's move up to our basic sliders now. Basic sliders are going to be pretty simple as well. Let's go ahead and paste in where we want to be. Perfect. Exposure comes down just a little bit. Highlights and whites are going to come way down. Okay, look at Caelid. There's no really bright spots. Okay, it's all kind of like a monotone, monoluminance scene, okay? And it's just varies between color. It's like varies between red and gray in the sky. So we want to get rid of all those highlights and whites. Our shadows are going to come up a little bit just to flatten out the image, but we're going to make some pretty drastic changes via masking, where we select the whole sky, and it's going to kind of get the sky where we need it to be. And right now you're like, hey, how's this Caelid? It's not red. Well, we're gonna get there, don't worry. We're gonna turn stuff red, all right? Let's move on down to the color mixer now. Starting with the saturation area, let's go ahead and make those changes. So obviously, our red saturation going to 100. It's Caelid, right? Our orange saturation coming up just a little bit, plus 24. Yellows and greens are gonna come down, all right? We don't want a lot of yellows or greens, but we do have some. Like if we look at Caelid, all the stuff that's not the sky, like in the landscape, there's some yellow going on. Okay, so we want to keep some yellow in there. And green, it really shows up in the yellow stuff. So that's why we have to keep green. Aqua, bloom, purple, magenta, get them out of here. They're not involved in the Caelid image. Okay, our hues, basically the same thing, except our greens, we're going to take them, move them all the way over to yellow. There's not really greens in Caelid, right? There's yellows, but we want the green stuff to turn into yellow, so we're just going to shift the hue and do it that way. And then for our luminance, orange and yellow, we're going to brighten up the orange a little bit, darken the yellows. We're going to try to get it to a kind of monotone orange, yellow, peach type of situation for everything that is not the sky. So that's how we're going to do it. With the luminance sliders here. Next we moved on to color grading, okay? You might think color grading is pretty significant here when it comes to Caelid, but in truth it's not. We're only going to make slight color grades here. We're going to do the major color grades in the masks. The reason is because the sky has such a different color feel than the landscape. Like the sky is blood red, right? But the landscape is not blood red. The landscape is like orangey yellow. Okay, so if we just color grade straight up, just everything red, it's not gonna look that good. It's not gonna look like Caelid, right? So we're just gonna adjust for orangey yellow everywhere and then make the sky even redder using masks. So let me go ahead and show you guys where these color wheels are going to be adjusted to. Okay, this is it. Shadows don't move at all. Midtones, we're gonna come over to the orange, the image kind of feels pink, to be honest. And then our highlights also over to the orange, maybe a little bit lower, like towards the red. And then don't forget these guys, all of the luminance sliders, we're gonna basically move over to the left, okay? It's gonna basically darken up everywhere, but it's like a solid adjustment, and we're gonna need it to get Caelid looking like it does. One last adjustment in the basic sliders before we get to masking is going to be calibration. It's not a very big adjustment. We're just going to take this hue, shift it over to about here, and then our saturation also up a couple points. That's all we're going to need for calibration. Now let's move on to the masking. This is where the heavy lifting comes in to turn our sky blood red. In addition to having to turn the sky blood red in this particular image, because we have water in the scene, we have to adjust the water as well so it matches the reflection of the sky. Like if we look at what we have right now, if we turn the sky just red, the water is still going to be this like weird pinkish gray thing, right? And that's not going to be great. So we're going to have to adjust the water as well as the sky. So I'm going to do 3 masks for this edit. If you don't have water in yours, you probably only need 2, like the sky and then everything else. But in mine, I need 3. I need the sky, I need the water, and I need everything else, everything between. Okay, so let me go ahead and show you what those masks are going to be looking like and what they're doing. If we take our first mask, this is a select sky mask. We're going to be selecting, just using the select sky option for the mask, and then obviously cleaning up anything that's selecting the buildings, the top of the buildings, whatever, get rid of all that. These are the adjustments we're going to make. We're going to drop our exposure down just a little bit, and then we're going to come over to our contrast, bump it up, and our highlights and shadows and whites and blacks, whoosh, to the left. All right, drop them all down, and that's going to get us where we need to be. As I mentioned earlier when we were doing the overall corrections, we want to take those highlights and whites, get them out of here. Because if we look at Caelid's sky, there's no whites. There's nothing white about it. It's either like light red or dark red, like red gray. Okay, we don't want any whites, and that's why this image is not ideal. We might want to crop out the left half because there is some sun peeking through. There shouldn't be any sun peeking through in Caelid. Okay, so that's why we don't really use the left part of our image. We might crop that out just a little bit, but we'll get to there when we finish the edit overall. Our temperature is going to come up to plus 20, and our tint's going to come down to counteract a little bit of that at minus 12. We're going to actually drop our saturation all the way down to 100, minus 100. The reason is we're going to be able to adjust the color using the color tone curve in this mask. Okay, leaving the saturation up, it makes the white parts of the sky look funny. It makes them look orange, like bright orange. And that was weird. We just got rid of that. We're going to move down the saturation to minus 100. I'm going to reveal what this mask does after we get through the edits, okay? Okay, now onto our tone curve, or our color curves. There are some major adjustments being made here, and it's kind of required because Caelid is real weird, okay? This is our like black and white curve. Look at this. We're trying to get those highlights out of here, dude. We're trying to cut them straight off. Look how far down that the highlights go. We're basically right here, okay? Like halfway down the square, we're just getting rid of it. And then we're gonna bump up the blacks down here and pull down the shadows like a little bit into the curve, okay? Very weird, but it's necessary. Let's look at the red one. In the reds, we're gonna be bumping up the reds across the shadows, okay? From the shadows to the midtones, and it gets a little bit of the highlights here. But for the rest of our highlights, we're just going to leave it right where it is. And I don't know, I kind of did a trial and error for this. It's kind of what you got to do when you have these unnatural scenes, is to trial and error that until the color looks good. But this is where I found that it works the best. Let's move on over to the blue curve. We're going to go over to our shadows and pull them down towards the yellows a little bit, from the shadows to the midtones a bit. And then up to the highlights, we have kind of normal. We pulled it up to blue a little bit in the highlights. Okay, a few final adjustments here to the sky. Texture is going to come down to -33. Clarity is going to come down to -30. It kind of gives this sky like a blurred feel. Like it's not very crisp clouds. They're kind of smudged clouds, for lack of better words. And yeah, that's going to be it. Let's turn on this mask now. Well, that's with the overlay. There we go. That's our Caelid sky, okay? It's red, it's bright red where the light comes through, it's gray red where the light does not come through, and that's the best we could do. The weirdest part about this are the bright white spots. Like I mentioned earlier, Caelid doesn't have the bright white spots in the sky. Let me also show you why saturation came all the way down. If we bring the saturation back up to normal, those bright white spots turn orange. And we don't want that. It's weird. Okay, we want just red, like monotone red throughout. So that's why saturation is down all the way. Yeah, and I think everything else is good. Now, let's move on to the next mask. We're gonna actually do the water here. And like I said, if we have water in our image, it has to reflect the sky properly. Mask number 3 is just a gradient mask from the bottom corner up. And luckily we have like the buildings reflecting into the water a little bit, so the thickest part of the mask is going to be the part where there's no reflection except for the sky, and then as we get into the buildings, the mask will kind of wear off. Now let's go ahead and check out what those adjustments are for this one. We're just dropping exposure down a little bit here, temperature up a little bit. We're not making as significant of adjustments, but we do need to adjust the tone curves, similar to how we did in the sky mask. So bumping up the reds over here in the shadows and midtones, and then the highlights kind of re-merge to what's normal or what's original. And then we have our blue tone curve. We're going to do a similar thing to what we did before, pulling down the blues in the shadows and bumping up to the blues in the highlights. Now let's go ahead and turn this mask on to see the effect. There we go. It's just the water's red now. Is basically all we did. It doesn't have to be like exactly matching the sky, like reflections are not going to be the exact hues, right? But we do need the water to at least reflect red. Now we could actually stop here, we're pretty close. I just made a couple final adjustments to the buildings here, everything else in the landscape, and you can choose to just stop here, or we can make these adjustments. I dropped the exposure a little bit, bumped up the whites and blacks a little bit, and then dropped the saturation down some. I didn't think there should be too much color going on in the Caelid scene. It's kind of like orange or gray in the landscape, so that's what I tried to stick with. And then for our color curve, I just bumped up the reds ever so slightly in the shadows and midtones, just to kind of even out the color grade, essentially, right? Our dehaze came down by -20, our clarity -7, and then everything else is good to go. Let's see what happens when we turn that mask on. Okay, it just really became hazy. I felt like these colors matched Caelid's landscape better, like by hazing these buildings out. I don't know, like you can keep the buildings how they are, but yeah, I think right here is where I liked it, where I felt that it matched Caelid the best. I know it looks kind of funny, I know it looks kind of unnatural, but hey, this is a Caelid edit. It's one of the hardest areas of Elden Ring to mimic, so this is where we ended up at. Now let's take a look at Caelid plus this image side by side, and we can see a pretty solid overlap. It's a little bit unnatural to edit this way, but we gotta match Caelid, team. It's one of the coolest areas of Elden Ring, so let me know what you guys think of this edit down in the comments below, or any changes that you would make to your editing process to match Caelid for your shot. Let me know what area, what photo you used. Somehow, if you could let me know what photo you used to turn it into Caelid, that would be really cool to know as well. Yeah, and I hope you guys enjoy. Subscribe for the next one, which is probably going to be Lane Dell. Make sure you check out Limgrave, Stormvale, and Liurnia if you haven't seen them yet. Subscribe to the channel for more. We'll catch you in the next one. See you soon.